Okay, today we have another video. This is actually a video I've wanted to do for a long time. It's my prediction for the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So, as you guys probably know, there's a conflict going on. Russia invaded Ukraine last February, so it's been almost a year already. And Ukraine has made some notable gains. Notably, they've kicked the Russians out of the north, out of this area, and out of this area. So, here's my map of Ukraine. I've highlighted a few cities. We have Lviv, Chernihiv. I think the only reason I have Lviv is a major city, so I have it because it's important. Chernihiv is a crucial city if you want to capture the north of Ukraine, and you kind of need to capture it in order to get to Kyiv from the north. There's no other good way to get to Kyiv without capturing the city, so it's important. Odessa to capture the south, and actually Odessa's the goal of the south. Kherson and Mykolaiv are the two cities to guard the south, kind of. There's what's it called? I have Zaporizhzhia and Dnipro. Technically, Russia claims Zaporizhzhia, and Dnipro is also an important city as it's one of Ukraine's largest. Donetsk, Luhansk. I have Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, as those are two important cities, logistical hubs. Mariupol, which might not be so important. We have Melitopol, which is this one. That might be important if Ukraine invades the south. And finally, Kharkiv, which is important to capturing the Ukrainian, east. Yeah, and it's Ukraine's second largest city. And obviously, we have Kyiv in there, which is the capital. So, yeah, here's my map. In red, we have Russia and its allies, Belarus, which I'll talk about later. In blue, we have Ukraine. And in white, all the way over here, we have technically neutral countries in this war. It's all NATO and Moldova. But countries that aren't about to invade Ukraine and not countries that are about to invade Belarus from the north. I just didn't feel like coloring it, so there's a border. One other thing, I decided to put the Transnistria here. They might use that. I doubt it, but I don't know. I just thought map of Russian control, you might as well show that part as well. So let's begin with my first prediction. This is a total Russian victory prediction. So in this prediction, we have Russia. They've recently retreated behind the Dnipro River, and this allows them time to regroup. And while they're regrouping, they spend the winter regrouping, and they also, crucially, get Belarus to join the war on their side. Now, this doesn't happen instantly, but this doesn't happen super quickly, but they don't get them to join early. They get them to join quickly, right before their invasion. So the Russian generals will spend some time reorganizing troops. They'll probably keep a defensive along the river here. In the north, they'll probably hold a defensive in some cities. And in the Donetsk and Luhansk region, Donbass, whatever. So we'll probably hold this line defensive, and don't worry, it won't be that important. But they basically will launch one big invasion in the spring, probably sometime around March or February. This invasion will most likely be a combined effort by Russia and Belarus. And what it would do is, Russia would get Belarus to join the war. They know that they're joining the war, but they officially join the war very quickly. Russia would probably declare, or might declare, full-on war, and they're only using about a third of their army in Ukraine, so they'd send all their army to Ukraine. It's not like the other borders need to be attacked or whatever. Need to be defended. So yeah, let's get into this great Russian invasion. So Russia, we'd have a northern invasion, attempt to take Kyiv. In order to do that, as I previously stated, they'd have to go through Chernihiv, which a large Russian force would rush to the city. Get it, Russian rush. Now, Chernihiv is right near one of Belarus's largest cities, the second largest city. So these would also be Belarusian forces in hopes of capturing, and they would actually want to keep the city for themselves. They expand into the rural Ukrainian territory and a northern invasion. Now this causes a bunch of Ukrainian forces to scramble, leaving a very exposed southern front, which actually leads to a total collapse of Donetsk. This is something Russia definitely wants. This is a very pro-Russian region, and I'm not even quite sure they want to be such a part of Ukraine. If they do, then please don't cancel me. And also just a broader invasion on the entire border, capturing much of the borderlands, including the city of Sumy. I don't know, I'm just looking at a map. However, the main invasion in the north captures the city of Chernihiv, and with that, they have reached the Dnieper River, besieging Kyiv, not besieging it, but putting it against the river. In the north, an invasion does the same, finally reaching the suburbs, getting this lake, which is called the Kyiv Reservoir. I don't know much about it, but what I can assume is that Kyiv gets much of its water from there, so that might be a problem. And they actually managed to siege the city. This is a best case scenario for Russia, by the way. I'm not saying this is realistic. I'm not saying it's unrealistic. I'm just saying it's best case scenario for Russia. This is their total invasion that goes successfully. With Kyiv now surrounded, Ukrainian morale is at an all-time low, leading to another city not only being surrounded but being captured, that being Zaporizhzhia. And the river is crossed down south, the Dnieper River, capturing the city, besieging both the cities of Kherson and Mykolaiv, so that's not looking great for Ukraine, until eventually both of them fall. And finally Kyiv falls to Russia. This leads to many Ukrainian forces kind of collapsing, and with the Russia hopes to kind of have a southern meetup. So in order to do that, they use the southern front, quickly push along the river. How quickly does this actually happen? I don't know, it's probably pretty slow. There's not many cities in this area, so it's pretty easy to defend, I guess. So yeah. And eventually the two sides meet up, and Ukraine realizes now they're now cut in two. There's not really one side which is stronger. However, most of the army will be over here, and I guess population's probably mostly over here. That might be a problem. Finally, Belarus invades from the north, and they kind of want revenge. Much of this area used to be Polish, and much of Belarus used to be Polish, so Belarus once again looks to completely capture this area. It's also near one of a large city in Belarus, Brest, so they like to take it. The prize, obviously, out here in the west is the city of Lviv. This area is undefended, or rather undefended, I believe. so it's rather easy. They just hold a defensive here for now. Ukraine tries to break this cutoff, but they can't. Eventually, however, much of this western region falls, and Ukraine's third largest city, Odessa, is put under siege, along with Ukraine's probably like fifth largest city, Lviv, which is put under a total siege after being cut off from Poland. Because let's face it, much of this area, much of this area might have more people, but this area had the NATO weapons, so yeah. With those two cities under siege, the war remains. Many forces start moving east. They managed to capture the city of Dnipro and push the entire Russian front, the Ukrainian front, up behind the river. And with that, a large invasion of the country pursues, which leads to the eventual collapse of the country. Kharkiv, put into siege, falls, so does Lviv, and Odessa. And just like that, this war is over in a total Russian victory. No, I did not say that's realistic. That was my way of showing what a total Russian victory would look like. And that is with Russia using 100% of their army in Ukraine, 100% of the military in Ukraine, and yeah, that's scenario one, total Russian victory. Peace treaty, yes. I think a peace treaty would have Ukraine split along the river, split along the Dnipro. Yeah, I think that's fair. And this side of Ukraine becomes a Russian puppet. Yeah, Russian puppet. And so this becomes all part of Russia. Belarus takes control of basically the whole north of the country. Not like that. So they get Chernihiv and a bunch of other cities in the north. However, they push to get like Lviv, but Russia's like no chance. So instead, Russia gets the entire area east of the river, and the rest becomes a puppet state. Yeah, that's it. That's scenario one. Now let's do scenario two, and then I think I'll probably end this video and maybe do a part 2 to this, because this is taking longer than I thought, because I'm effectively doing 4 full-out wars, so that's fun. Yeah, scenario 2, we have a partial Russian victory. This won't be as extreme, more realistic. I'm not saying the other one can't happen, but I'm saying it's very unlikely to happen. I'm just giving my thoughts on what a partial Russian victory would look like, I think. This is a much more likely scenario. I think this is the most likely, actually. And this is a partial Russian victory. So, the way this would happen is Belarus does not join. Belarus does not join this time. I think that was the only scenario where Belarus joins. That was the only time Belarus joined, but this time we have still much of the Russian army. We still have much of the Russian army being... by the way, I forgot to mention the last one. This part of the Kherson Oblast also is part of Russia, not the puppet state. Anyway, so in this one we have Russia using more of the military, and what's the target region this time? It's the south and the city of Zaporizhia, so Kyiv, Lviv, all those western places, western Ukrainian places, they stay out of this war. there's no major surrounding look to happen. They might look to cut them off there, and maybe... Oh, yeah, no, Kharkiv and the south. So, basically, this front, they hope to kind of expand it. So they do that. First thing, capture Kharkiv. This is a major city, Ukraine's second largest, and it's also Russian speaking, so it's definitely not a city that, it still wants to be part of Ukraine, but it's not as, like, fondly Ukrainian the same way the rest of the country is. It might be, though, don't quote me on that. They captured the city of Izium, which, remember, was a major city. And in Donetsk, they managed to capture the rest of the region, which is Donbass Industrial Region. And they captured the entire oblast. The government of the oblast is like, yeah, whatever. So, this gives them a more strategical advantage, both in invading the west and the north, so. Oops. So that's good. Now we have Russia. Yeah, that's big, because that's 4 million people, so, yeah. What happens now? Oh, I know. We have a Russian, like, invasion in the north. Now this looks to capture Kharkiv, which is very close to the Russian border, only about 20 miles-ish. In fact, part of the city's closer to Russia than it is to, well, the city. Other parts of the city. Now, so it's very close to Russia, which leads to the city very quickly not being put under a full siege, but a partial siege, with only a tiny connector to keep supplying the city. Jesus. Yeah, this has to be my last scenario. Meanwhile, in the south, forces push into the Dnipro Oblast, and there's not many cities there, but they're about to capture the 2 big cities in this region, which are Zaporizhia and Dnipro. Eventually, the cities are cut off from each other, I guess. Zaporizhia is cut off from the rest of Ukraine, however, there's still, like, a bridge and whatever. But much of it is cut off, and there's 2 bridges, actually. Eventually, in the south, they managed to put the city under a full siege and capture the city. I mean, I could either have them capture it now or later, but let's just say they capture it now. And finally, we have, so now the defensive along the river is much stronger, and it's only about 20-ish miles from Dnipro, 30 miles, 40, 50 maybe, so further than I said. In the south, they cut off Kharkiv, and let's just save the details. The city is under siege. It does not stand a chance. Yeah. Mariupol, they can fight super strong. This might take a while. I'm not saying this is easy. By the way, both of these offensives occur in the spring. I forgot to mention, but this offensive also occurs in the spring. So now, with much of eastern Ukraine captured, they decide to take the entire oblast of Kharkiv. And now with much of this area captured, Russia has the momentum, Ukraine really doesn't, and they decide to go for the south. Quickly they cross the river. I'm not having them cross the river with difficulty. I don't think it would be too hard for them, especially because much of this is rural. I could probably just cross some random bridge. So yeah. Yeah, so, Kherson is in a very bad place. It gets captured. Mykolaiv, on the other hand, is in a not really much of a better place. No, it's in a worse place. it also gets captured. And just like that, those two major cities are not really more just those two cities get captured by the Russians. And now but they look to capture Odessa and then super peace. Ukraine wants peace already, but they don't look. They've like actually tried suing for peace. I'm not quite sure how serious those peace talks are now, but they want peace in this scenario already. But Russia says no, unless I get Odessa, and Ukraine says no. So they continue the southern offensive, and this is where we have Transnistria coming in. They don't capture Odessa, but they do cut off the south of Ukraine, which is in Romania and that area. So they cut off the Romanian border, and this leads to a bit of NATO funding. I'm not quite sure how much is going through here. I imagine, not quite sure how much NATO funding is going this way. I imagine much is coming this way, but a bit, especially to Odessa. So now it's a logistical nightmare for NATO. They knew this was coming, so they were starting to supply that way. Once again, fictional scenario. And finally, the city of Odessa falls, and they sue for peace. So yeah, that was scenario 2. Also a kind of partial Russian victory. It was actually decently close to a total Russian victory. Not really. They captured the second and third largest cities as well as like the fourth and fifth. So definitely big. I guess I'll just briefly go over an even less partial victory, which is nothing. If nothing happens right now, Russia will just keep this. In that scenario that I just had though, I think the post borders would look something like this. I think they'd take much of the south along they'd take the Dnipro and Kharkiv west. And Transnistria would be independent. And then one other quick scenario, this is a tie. This is my last scenario for this video. The next two will be, which is partial and total Ukrainian victory. Yes, total Ukrainian victory. That one's not realistic. Partial is though. So this might be the most realistic. I think this and partial Russian, which we just did. There's also partial Russian, kind of like more or less partial. There's partial as in like there's partial as in like they capture all this, which is like a big partial. There's also big partial where they capture like just this, or they just this, or heck, even just this. So there's definitely different types of partial victories. So I think that's worth mentioning. What was I saying? Oh yes, of course. So now there's a tie where I think if a tie is to happen, if the borders are to be drawn right now, if both sides are like, let's negotiate right now, I think what would happen is Crimea would become, Russia would recognize Crimea, the world would recognize Crimea as part of Russia, and Donetsk and Luhansk as one republic. Actually, I think it looks something like that. They'd recognize the rebel areas as one republic, and then I think Russia would take control of all this area. Would they? I think Russia would take control of this area, and maybe this area. However, yeah, Russia would definitely control Mariupol, and Melitopol. Definitely Donetsk, Luhansk. But that's really all they could ask for if they negotiated right now. And they'd probably be forced to pay, and in return, Ukraine would probably get war reparations, and they'd probably have, I think the most likely scenario in any of these is a neutral Ukraine. I think in every scenario, part of the peace deal will be a neutral Ukraine, one that can't join NATO, can't join Russia's sphere of influence, because, I mean, really everyone, like, Ukraine wants to join NATO, but Russia's not going to let them, and if Ukraine says that part of their peace deal is not joining NATO, they could probably they might be able to get a bit more territory. So, yeah, that is part one of my predictions for the Ukraine conflict. I'd say the first scenario is unlikely, but the next two I think are actually pretty likely. Maybe I went a bit overboard on that scenario with the borders. Maybe they captured too many cities, but part of it definitely there's some truth. Not really. I think it's more likely that they just capture like a specific region, really Donetsk maybe down here or here. I doubt they'll get all three of them, and they'll definitely not get up here, I don't think. So yeah, and I don't think they'll get involved. Odessa is definitely in the possibility though. And Kharkiv. I think they really want Kharkiv. They never said it, but I think they really want it. Okay, that's my video. Yeah. Partial Ukrainian and total Ukrainian coming next.